The next document that I would like to talk with you about is a book. It's called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's written by C.S. Lewis. It was written in the mid-20th century. Lewis was a pretty famous Christian thinker and apologist, and that sort of thing. And so these books were received as children's books that are allegorical. They're the story of 4 children that find themselves in this mysterious world called Narnia, where a witch has made it always winter and never Christmas. There is a Christ figure in the book named Aslan, who's this lion. He ends up sacrificing himself and then being resurrected, and the themes sort of continue. There are a couple things I want to note about our orienting questions of how does this artifact position the child and how does this artifact position the parent. The artifact positions the child in a progressed way from earlier, where the stories were safe, and then we looked at the Jesus Storybook Bible, where the story was sort of safe. In this story, the story is less safe. A famous line from the books is where the children find out that Aslan is in fact a lion, and they ask a beaver, they are talking animals, they ask a beaver, will he be safe? And the beaver laughs and says, of course he isn't safe, but he's good. And so we see a turn in the positioning of the child at this point in the child's development. This is the kind of story you would read your child when they, maybe when they were 7 or 8. There's a turn now that the child is able maybe to grasp more of the risk involved in the faith, more of the sort of stakes about what's going on in this fight of good and evil. It also positions the child as a little more separate from the parent. This is a book that presumably could be read at the appropriate age level. Maybe at 10, I think is when I first read this book, and I might have been a little slow to read. But so then it begins to position the child as able to gather their own information about the faith, their own perspective on the faith and on religiosity in general. It positions the parent as a storyteller. And this is similar to the way that the Jesus Storybook Bible that we talked about earlier also positions the parent as a storyteller. The idea here is that the parent is not information downloading, but sort of story orienting. That the parent is beginning to present themes, and so the allegory has themes that then relate back to the Christian faith. It also presents the parent as a facilitator of stories instead of as the necessary teller of stories. That the parent now is able to purchase stories that then will sort of nurture the child's growth on their own without necessarily the parent's involvement. The next artifact that I want to present is a rosary. This rosary was given to me today. Actually, I, not being Catholic, do not have a rosary, but a friend of mine that's Catholic took me down to the Catholic Center for the University of Georgia, and they graciously gave me one. I just asked to look at one, and they said I could have one. It's a neat artifact to consider in terms of how it orients a child and a parent mutually to an act. Just so you know, in case you've not seen a rosary before, this is what one looks like. It has a crucifix. A crucifix is a cross that has the Christ on it. He sort of looks limp here. Above his head is INRI, which stands for a phrase in Latin, which means Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. In the story, that's sort of ironically posted above his head as he's being executed. There's a string, sort of a twine-ish feel to it. And then it has these beads, and the way that it's used, I had my friend explain it to me because I didn't actually know, is that you begin with, it's tactile. You begin by holding the crucifix, and there's a statement of faith called the Apostles' Creed that is said. Then then there are a series of prayers, which are just different sort of prayers that a person would memorize. And then a person moves through each of these, and each of these beads represents a prayer that needs to be said. And each set of the beads, called a decade, represents a theme of mystery. And so there are the sorrowful mysteries, the wondrous mysteries, and there are some others. The complexity builds. The more you want to get into the complexity, the more there is available for you. And so I think that that's actually a key aspect of understanding how this artifact positions the child and positions the parent. This, if crosses are a universal symbol of Christianity, crucifixes may well be the universally recognizable symbol of Catholicism. They're artifacts that adults and children make use of in meditation, that a parent instructs the child not so that the child can make a use of for a moment, like this, and then abandon later, or even like this Jesus Storybook Bible, where the child hopefully will move on to the actual scriptures later. This is something that a child is taught that they continue to use throughout their lives. There's a developmental idea here that children begin with the basic prayer. It helps them to pray those basic prayers over and over again. Repetition inculcates the religious belief. But then as they grow in their understanding of it, they can move into this complexity of understanding these divine mysteries, or each of these decades is what these sections are called, and they have a mystery associated with them. And each of the mysteries have virtues associated with it. Children are then positioned not as a different type of Christian, as sort of a different type of member of the faith, but rather as a less progressed member of the faith that can grow in their understanding and grasp of the complexity. We're going to return to this theme of repetition and this theme of complexity with our next artifact, which is the liturgy used at a Eucharistic service.